Hi, fourth grade. It's Mrs. Hopkins. I thought I would try something a little different today and do a story for you to listen to, and then I have a little activity for you to do along with it, okay? So I know this is a little different, so bear with me. This is my first official video to you. So hopefully you can just sit back, listen, enjoy the story, and then you can fill in the graphic organizer when we are finished, okay? So this story is called Mr. Peabody's Apples, and it's actually by Madonna. So I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Madonna, but she was a singer in the 80s. So Mr. Peabody's Apples. Welcome to Happyville. Playing baseball. In the town of Happyville, which wasn't a very big town, Mr. Peabody was congratulating his Little League team on a great game. They had not won, but no one really cared because they had such a good time playing. Mr. Peabody was the history teacher at the local elementary school, and in the summertime, he dedicated every Saturday to organizing baseball games with other schools. Billy Little, who wasn't a very big boy, was one of Mr. Peabody's students. He loved baseball more than anything, and he thought Mr. Peabody was the greatest. After each game, he would always stay to help pick up all the bats and balls. And when they were finished, Mr. Peabody would smile and say, "Thanks, Billy. Good job. I'll see you next Saturday." So I'm sure there's lots of boys and girls out there missing Little League season right now. There's Mr. Peabody congratulating them even though they lost. Then he would start his walk home along the main street of Happyville, which wasn't a very big street, waving hello to everyone he knew, and everyone would wave hello back. Along the way, he always passed Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market. Here, Mr. Peabody would stop and admire Mr. Funkadeli's fresh apples. He would pick out the shiniest apple, drop it in his bag, and continue on his way. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom watched with curiosity as Mr. Peabody walked away with the apple. "That's strange," Tommy said to himself. "Mr. Peabody didn't pay anyone for that apple." Tommy got on his skateboard and rushed to tell his friends. So here's Mr. Peabody with the apple. There's Tommy watching him take the apple. He picked the shiniest one, put it in his bag. The following Saturday, Mr. Peabody's team played another game, and they lost, as usual. But no one seemed to care because they'd had such a good time playing. Billy picked up the balls and bats, and Mr. Peabody set off for his walk home. He waved to everyone he knew, and they waved back. Once again, he stopped outside Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market, picked up the shiniest apple, dropped it in his bag, and continued on his way. Across the street, Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends watched Mr. Peabody, and they were amazed at what they saw. Mr. Peabody had not paid for his apple again. They couldn't wait to tell all of their friends, who told their parents, who told their neighbors, who told their friends, in the town of Happyville, which wasn't a very big town. So here's Tommy and his friends watching him, Mr. Peabody, taking another shiny apple. They were amazed at what they saw. So the Saturday after that, Mr. Peabody was standing all alone on the baseball field, wondering where everybody was. Then he saw Billy walking toward him with a sad look on his face. "Hello, Billy. I'm glad you're here, but where is the rest of the team?" asked Mr. Peabody. Billy remained silent. "What is it, Billy?" he asked again. Billy didn't look up. Everybody thinks you're a thief," he said to the ground. Mr. Peabody looked confused. He took off his hat and scratched his head. "Who says I am a thief, Billy? And what did I steal?" he asked. "Tommy Tittlebottom and his friends said they saw you take an apple from Mr. Funkadeli's fruit market twice, and they said you didn't pay for them," answered Billy. "Ah," said Mr. Peabody, putting his hat back on his head. Let's go and talk to Mr. Funkadelic about it, shall we? So here's Mr. Peabody wondering why nobody's showing up for Little League. And there's poor Billy, very sad to have to tell him that everyone thinks he's a thief. They walked down the main street, which wasn't a very big street, and Mr. Peabody waved to all the people he knew. But now some of them did not wave back, and some pretended they did not even see him. They finally arrived at Mr. Funkadelic's fruit market. Out popped Mr. Funkadelic, who said, "Hey, what are you doing here, Mr. Peabody? Why aren't you at the game?" "There wasn't a game today," said Mr. Peabody, "and I was wondering if I could take my apple earlier than usual." "Sure, why not?" replied Mr. Funkadelic. "You pay for them every Saturday morning when you pick up your milk. You can take them whenever you like. You want the big shiny one, Mr. Peabody?" Mr. Peabody took his apple, smiled, and offered it to Billy. "I would like to take the apple, Mr. Peabody, but I have to go and find Tommy and explain everything to him," said Billy. "When you find him, ask him to come over to my house. I would like to speak to him too," replied Mr. Peabody. So here's Mr. Peabody offering Billy the apple. He looks a little shocked now, doesn't he? A little while later, Billy found Tommy and told him what had happened with the apples. He told Tommy that Mr. Peabody wanted to speak to him right away. So off Tommy ran, and when he arrived, he rang the doorbell, and Mr. Peabody came to the door. They looked at each other for a while. "Oh dear," Mr. Peabody said Tommy on the doorstep. "I didn't understand. I should not have said what I said, but it looked like you hadn't paid for those apples." Mr. Peabody's eyebrows went up a little, and he felt a warm breeze blow across his face. "It doesn't matter what it looked like. What matters is the truth." Tommy looked down at his shoes and said, "I am so sorry. What can I do to make things better now?" Mr. Peabody took a deep breath, looked up at a small cloud that was in the sky, and said, "I'll tell you what, Tommy. Meet me at the baseball diamond in 1 hour and bring a pillow stuffed with feathers." "Okay," Tommy said, who then ran off to his house to get a pillow. So here's Tommy at Mr. Peabody's door. An hour later, Tommy met Mr. Peabody on the pitcher's mound. "Hello, Tommy," said Mr. Peabody. "Follow me and bring your pillow." Tommy followed Mr. Peabody to the top of the bleachers, wondering what this was all about. "It's a very windy day, isn't it?" asked Mr. Peabody when they reached the top. Tommy nodded his head in agreement. "Here is a pair of scissors. Now cut the pillow in half and shake the feathers out." Tommy looked confused, but did it anyway. He thought it was a small price to pay to gain Mr. Peabody's forgiveness. The wind carried the thousands of feathers far and wide. So here they are meeting at the baseball field with this pillow. Here they are with the feathers. It says the wind carries the thousands of feathers far and wide. So Mr. Peabody might be trying to teach him a lesson here, right? Tommy looked relieved and said, "Is that all I have to do to make things better?" "There is one more thing," said Mr. Peabody. "Now you must go and pick up all the feathers." Tommy frowned. I don't think it's possible to pick up all those feathers," Tommy replied. "It would be just as impossible to undo the damage that you have done by spreading the rumor that I am a thief," said Mr. Peabody. "Each feather represents a person here in Hapville." So think about that. He's saying that all these feathers are like the people that he told that rumor to, that he was a thief. And how are you going to undo all of that after you told all of those people that rumor? There was a long pause as Tommy began to understand what Mr. Peabody was saying to him. Finally, he said, "I guess I have a lot of work ahead of me. Mr. Peabody smiled and said, "Indeed you do. Next time, don't be so quick to judge a person. And remember the power of your words." Then he handed Tommy the shiny red apple and made his way home. So there's Mr. Peabody heading home. I think he taught Tommy a pretty good lesson. The end. And it looks like they were back out playing some baseball. Hopefully, Tommy tries to fix his mistake and talks to the people in his town about what he told them, and that the new rumor spreads that he is not a thief, right? So what I'm going to post then is this little graphic organizer to go along with it. It says the big idea or topic at the top, the characters, what do they do or say to help you figure out. So what is the big idea? Is it about friendship? Is it about kindness? Is it about courage? Is it about acceptance? Which one is it about? And then what the characters say or do to prove that big theme. So up here just needs to be one word. That's it. So what was Mr. Peabody trying to teach Tommy in this story? And then down here, what message can you take from the story? So this should be like a sentence or two. What did you learn from Mr. Peabody's story? Now, if you can't print this out when I post it, you can always just recreate it. I'll put a picture of it in Class Dojo. You could always just write it on a piece of notebook paper. The big idea, what the characters say or do, and then what the message is that you learn from Mr. Peabody's story. Okay? So I know this is a different way of teaching and learning for all of you, but just remember these are all just resources to help you. I know you're not going to get through every single thing that I post online for you, but I want to make sure that I'm giving you enough. And this week was just all about theme, and you should all be familiar with theme since we learned it in the school time. Just make sure that you're staying happy and healthy and you're doing things to help your family, and make sure you're staying away from others, because that is what we are supposed to be doing, social distancing. And I miss you guys, and I hope that we can get back to some sort of normal routine soon. Okay? Oh, be sure to, once you are finished this, be sure to post either a picture to me on Class Dojo, or I know Green and Yellow Group, I set up your portfolios. You can add it to your portfolio so that I can see it. Okay? Have a great day, guys. Bye.